Victor Ramirez wasn't just any agent. He was a DEA agent, tough as nails, with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. For years, he'd chased bad guys, bringing down drug dealers and dismantling their wicked networks. Now at almost 50, he was in the middle of his biggest case yet. This wasn't just any cartel, this was the Viper cartel, known for being cruel and cunning. Victor and his team had been working day and night, gathering clues, listening to secret calls, and getting ready to strike a huge blow against them. He felt the weight of this case on his shoulders, knowing how many lives it could save if he succeeded. But Victor wasn't just a badge and a gun. He was also a dad, and that was the most important job he had. His daughter, Sophia, was 16, full of life, and the light of his world. She had bright, curious eyes and a laugh that could make him forget all the tough parts of his job. Sophia was in high school, dreaming of college, and sometimes she'd tease him about his old-fashioned ways. He loved their talks over dinner, even when they disagreed. He loved watching her grow into a smart, kind young woman. Every morning before heading out to face the dangers of his work, he'd make sure she had breakfast, and every night he'd check on her, even if she was already asleep. Sophia was his heart, his reason for everything. He often thought about how he was fighting to make the world safer for her, never imagining that the very world he fought against would come for her directly. Victor had just wrapped up a long meeting with his team, discussing the next steps to finally take down the Viper cartel. He felt a surge of hope, believing they were close to a breakthrough. He pulled out his phone, ready to send Sophia a quick text, asking how her day at school was. But instead of Sophia's name, a strange number flashed on his screen. A cold, shaky voice on the other end delivered the chilling news. "We have your daughter, Agent Ramirez. If you want to see her alive, you will do exactly as we say." Victor's blood ran cold. The cartel had Sophia. His worst nightmare had come true. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest, like a fist squeezing his heart. He tried to speak, but his voice was stuck. All he could think of was Sophia's face, her bright smile, now possibly filled with fear. The voice on the phone was clear and cruel. They wanted him to mess up his own case against the Viper cartel. They wanted him to let their shipments through, to hide evidence, to make his team fail. If he didn't, Sophia would be hurt. Every word was a hammer blow to Victor's soul. He was trapped. His duty as an agent was to catch these criminals, but his duty as a father was to protect his child. How could he choose? The thought of Sophia in danger made his hands tremble. He felt a mix of burning anger and deep sadness. He knew he had to save her no matter the cost. He would do whatever it took. He promised himself and Sophia that he would bring her home. The next morning, Victor walked into the DEA office, a heavy cloud hanging over him. He had to act like everything was normal, but inside he was a storm of fear and anger. He looked at his team, their faces eager to continue the fight against the cartel, and felt a pang of guilt. He had to pretend to be on their side while secretly working against them to save Sophia. His first task was to accidentally lose an important file about a cartel hideout. It was a file he had spent weeks putting together. With shaking hands, he put it in a wrong stack, hoping no one would find it until it was too late. His heart pounded as he did it, feeling like a traitor. Later, during a meeting, he spoke in a way that made his team think a certain lead was not important, even though he knew it was very important. He watched as they moved on to other things, and a cold knot formed in his stomach. Each small mistake felt like a giant step away from his duty, but a necessary step towards Sophia. Every day was a terrible game. He had to look the cartel's men in the eye on his phone, acting like he was doing their bidding, while at the same time he was trying to find out where they kept Sophia. He spent hours late at night, alone in his office, looking at maps and old reports, trying to find any tiny clue that could lead him to his daughter. He was playing both sides, a dangerous dance, with Sophia's life hanging in the balance. The hardest part was talking to his team. Victor sat in meetings, listening to their plans, knowing he couldn't share the truth. His mind was a whirlwind of worry for Sophia, yet he had to look calm, like the strong leader they knew. He would ask questions about small details of the cartel's operations, pretending it was for the main case. but really, he was looking for anything that might hint at Sophia's location. He'd carefully guide conversations, hoping someone would mention something useful without realizing it. One afternoon, while reviewing old surveillance photos of a cartel money drop, Victor spotted something small in the background. A specific kind of graffiti on a wall, a unique symbol he'd seen before in a different part of the city. He remembered that symbol from an old, unsolved case file about a minor drug runner who had ties to the Viper cartel, someone they hadn't looked at closely in years. Could it be a hidden message, a location marker? He couldn't bring it up directly. Instead, he made a comment about revisiting old leads in a casual way during a team huddle, hoping someone would pick up on it. Agent Miller, sharp as ever, said, "You mean like that scorpion tag we saw in the East End reports from last year, Victor? I always thought that was odd." Victor's heart leaped. The East End, it was a long shot, but it was a lead. He pushed down his excitement, simply nodding and saying, "Could be. Keep it in mind, everyone." He knew he couldn't ask for help directly, but he would use every bit of his experience and every word from his team to build his secret map to Sophia. The cartel wasn't satisfied with small mistakes. The phone rang again, its harsh tone making Victor jump. This time the voice was colder, more demanding. "Agent Ramirez, we have a big shipment coming in tonight. We want you to make sure your team is nowhere near the docks. If that shipment is touched, your daughter will pay the price." This wasn't just about losing a file. This was about letting a massive amount of drugs flood the streets and giving the Viper cartel a huge win. It was a direct order to completely ruin his case. Victor's mind raced. He couldn't just let the shipment go through. But he also couldn't risk Sophia. He had to come up with a plan, and fast. He remembered the East End light, the scorpion tag. Could he use this new, dangerous task to his advantage? He had to make it look like he was helping the cartel, but really he needed to set them up, to turn their own plan against them. He went to his boss, acting very tired and worried about a false lead he'd been chasing. He told his boss he felt sure the cartel was planning something big in the East End, a place they hadn't really focused on. He even suggested sending a small, less experienced team to check it out, saying it was probably a waste of time but worth a look. His boss, trusting Victor's judgment, agreed to send a few agents to the East End. This was a huge gamble. Victor was sending his own team on a wild goose chase, away from the real action at the docks, just as the cartel wanted. But he also knew that the East End was his only real clue to Sophia. It was a desperate, dangerous move, but he hoped it would buy him time and give him a chance to find Sophia while the cartel thought he was playing their game. With his team now heading towards the East End, Victor knew his window of opportunity was small. He had to move, and he had to move alone. He drove his old, unmarked car towards the grimy, forgotten streets of the East End, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. The scorpion tag was a faint hope, but it was all he had. He cruised slowly, his eyes scanning every brick wall, every abandoned building, searching for that familiar symbol. Then he saw it. Faded but clear, spray-painted on the side of an old, dusty warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The scorpion with a small, almost invisible number 7 underneath it. Number 7. Victor's mind flashed back to the cartel's internal codes he'd studied. 7 often meant a temporary holding spot, a place they used before moving people or goods to a more secure location. This was it. This had to be it. A wave of both fear and fierce determination washed over him. Sophia was inside. He could feel it. But the cartel would soon realize their shipment at the docks was going through without a hitch, and they would know he hadn't stopped his team. They would know he tricked them. He had to get Sophia out before they found out and came looking for him, or worse, for her. The clock was ticking, loud and clear in his ears. Every second felt like an hour. He took a deep breath, gripped the steering wheel, and prepared himself for the most dangerous rescue of his life. Victor knew he couldn't call for backup. If word got out that his daughter had been kidnapped, it would not only put Sophia in more danger but also ruin his career and the entire cartel case. He had to go in alone. He quickly drove a few blocks away, parked his car in a hidden spot, and got out his gear. He put on his bulletproof vest, checked his pistol, and grabbed a small flashlight and a knife. Every move was sharp, practiced, but his hands still trembled slightly. He crept back towards the warehouse, moving quietly through the shadows of the abandoned buildings. He remembered all his training, all the times he had gone into dangerous places alone. This time it was different. This time it was for Sophia. He scanned the warehouse walls, looking for any signs of guards, any cameras, any easy way in. He saw a small, broken window high up on one side. It was a tight squeeze, but he thought he could make it. He found an old, broken crate nearby and carefully stacked it to reach the window. With a grunt, he pulled himself up, squeezed through the dusty opening, and dropped silently onto the concrete floor inside. The air was cold and smelled of dust and old metal. He heard faint voices from deeper inside the warehouse. Sophia was here. His heart tightened, but also filled with a new, fierce resolve. He was coming for her. Victor moved like a ghost through the dim warehouse, his ears straining for any sound. He found Sophia in a small, dusty room, tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear, a gag in her mouth. Two burly cartel members stood guard, talking loudly, their backs mostly to the door. Seeing his daughter like that filled Victor with a rage so cold and sharp it made him deadly. He burst into the room, a silent, furious blur. The first guard didn't even see him coming. Victor struck fast, a trained blow to the neck, knocking the man out cold. The second guard spun around, a startled shout leaving his lips as he reached for his weapon, but Victor was quicker. He dodged a wild swing, then used all his strength to disarm the man, twisting his arm and slamming him against the wall. It was a brutal, quick fight, fueled by a father's love and desperation. Victor didn't feel the pain as much as the burning need to get to Sophia. He untied her quickly, pulling the gag from her mouth. "Dad," she whispered, her voice shaky, tears streaming down her face. He hugged her tight, a quick, fierce hug. "We have to go soft," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He grabbed her hand and they crept out of the room. They could hear more voices now, closer. The cartel knew something was wrong. They had to get out and fast. Victor led Sophia through the maze of the warehouse, always looking for the quickest, safest way out, every nerve ending alert to danger. They burst out of a side door, running into the cool night air. Victor didn't stop until they reached his hidden car. He quickly started the engine and sped away, looking in the rearview mirror until the dark warehouse was out of sight. Sophia was trembling beside him, but she was safe. He reached over and squeezed her hand, a wave of relief washing over him so strong it almost made him dizzy. "You're okay, Soph," he said, his voice cracking. "You're safe." Sophia just nodded, leaning her head against his arm, still too scared to speak much. Victor knew they weren't completely out of danger. The cartel would soon realize what he had done. They would be furious. He had tricked them, rescued his daughter, and now they would want revenge. But for now, Sophia was beside him, and that was all that mattered. As he drove, a new kind of determination settled in him. He had played their game, but now it was his turn. He had saved Sophia, and that gave him the strength to finish what he started. The Viper cartel had crossed a line no one should ever cross. They had touched his family. He had to make sure they paid for it. He would use every bit of his skill, every contact, every piece of knowledge he had to bring them down for good. The rescue was done, but the fight was far from over. This was no longer just a case, it was personal. The hardest part of the next day wasn't chasing down bad guys, it was facing his own team. Victor sat in the chief's office, Sophia safely with a trusted friend, and told them everything. He started with the phone call, the cartel's threats, his desperate choices. He watched their faces change from confusion to shock, then to understanding. Agent Miller, who had always looked up to him, looked hurt at first, thinking Victor had truly let them down. But as Victor explained the impossible situation, the fear for his daughter, Miller's expression softened. His chief, a tough but fair woman named Captain Davies, listened without interrupting. When Victor finished, the room was quiet. He expected anger, maybe even being fired. Instead, Captain Davies slowly nodded. "Victor," she said, her voice calm, "you did what any father would do. Your actions were out of line with protocol, but I understand the impossible choice you faced." She paused, then added, "You saved your daughter. That matters more than any rule." He also explained how he'd used their own case details to find Sophia, how he'd tricked the cartel into thinking they were safe. He told them about the Scorpion tag and the East End warehouse. His team began to see the bigger picture, not just the mistakes he had made, but the smart, brave moves he'd taken to outwit the cartel while protecting Sophia. There was still a lot of work to do, and the cartel was surely looking for revenge, but now Victor wasn't alone. His team was with him, fully, ready to fight for both justice and for their friend. With his team now fully aware and united, Victor led the charge against the Viper cartel with a fierce new focus. The information he had gathered while pretending to work for them, combined with the East End lead and their own ongoing investigation, gave them a powerful advantage. They worked tirelessly, tracking down every lead, every member, every hidden stash. The cartel, surprised by the sudden, strong attack from the DEA, began to crumble. Days turned into nights, filled with raids and arrests. Victor was at the front of every operation, his eyes sharper, his resolve unbending. He made sure the bad guys who had dared to touch his daughter were among the first to be caught. The one who had made the phone calls, the one who had threatened Sophia, was finally cornered in a dark alley. Victor faced him, not with anger, but with a cold, firm justice. The man was arrested, along with many others. Finally, the news came. The Viper cartel was broken. Their leaders were in jail, their money was seized, and their drug operations were shut down. Victor felt a deep sigh leave his body, a sigh he hadn't known he was holding for weeks. He went home, not to empty silence, but to Sophia, who was now smiling, slowly getting back to her normal self. He hugged her tight, feeling the warmth of her safety. He had walked through fire, made terrible choices, and put everything on the line. But his daughter was safe, and the bad guys were caught. He could finally rest, knowing he had done his duty as an agent, and more importantly, as a father.